Hello and
And
welcome to
please clarify.
I'm Emily
And I'm Kalen,
and we're your hosts.
and welcome to episode 3.
Woo, season 2, episode 3.
Hey, we're so excited that you're here. And we definitely have a special episode today.
Yes.
We've been like talking about this for a minute now, and I know we
Mhm.
ended our last episode talking about the poor state of dating apps, the politics of desirability, and we really wanted to spend some time getting into navigating relationships in all of their forms, whether it's a romantic relationship, a platonic relationship, discussing intimacy at all levels. And we just really want to have space to talk about this. And to kick us off and get us in the right headspace, Emily, dream up for me. Like, how does a good relationship make you feel?
Yeah, this is a great question. And when I was writing out my response to this, yesterday evening, I realized that whenever I hear the word relationships, I immediately go to romantic relationships. And I
Mhm,
think it's interesting that I associate relationships with romantic. And then for some reason, friendships, I just refer to as friendships, even though those are also relationships.
mhm,
I think that for me, what it really boils down to is that I'm able to really just bring my full self to the
mm,
relationship and not necessarily feel afraid or ashamed of showing the parts of myself that I feel like maybe I don't show to everyone. And so I
mhm,
think for me, it's like, do I feel comfortable around this person? Does this person feel comfortable around me? Can we just kind of hang out and do nothing? If we removed the element of whether we met at work or an activity or something like that, if we remove that element, do we still want to hang out with each other? And also just genuinely wanting the best for that person, even like wherever that takes them. And even if that's like away from you, I know that sounds strange, but just genuinely, really kind of an unselfish love for that person and
mhm,
feeling that in return. So I guess that's kind of what a dream relationship feels like to
mhm.
me. What does it feel like to you?
Yeah. So I think you bring up a great point that when we say relationship, I think people automatically have the tendency to be like, oh, like a romantic partnership.
Mhm.
And I definitely like had that thought too. Like I was going to say when I was first getting started. What the heck am I talking about? When I was
First getting
first getting
started in
started as a human.
the
Oh my goodness. But I think a good relationship, to your point, really makes you feel seen, makes you
Mhm.
feel heard and validated in your current existence. I think often in a lot of our like working relationships when we're at the job or whatever, you often have a self that you come with. And that self is
Mhm.
really edited down. And I know for me personally, I've spent a great deal of my life like living as that other version of myself,
Mm.
but when I
Mhm.
am in good, authentic relationships, it feels second nature, it feels natural to
Mhm.
just be like, "This is who I am, this is what I'm coming with. I'm coming with the weirdness, I'm coming with
Mhm.
the deep thought, like, I'm coming with just so much," and I think the other person just recognizing, like, the multitude that exists within me, that exists within all of us, I think has been extremely validating,
Mhm.
and being able to make mistakes and grow together. And one
Mhm.
area that, like, I'm definitely trying to think more about, I'm not at the stage yet where I'm working at it, I'm just thinking
Mhm.
about it at this point,
Okay, yeah.
but is I think holding people accountable to their own
Mm.
growth. And I
Mm.
know I
Mhm.
have a couple of friends who, like, might have different goals in mind or whatever, might like, people have a lot going on, and I think, especially as women of color, when you come into friendship, it's not that we're not holding each other accountable, but the
Mhm.
world each day is already editing us down. It's
Mhm.
already telling us what we're doing well, what we're not doing well. And in friendships, like, especially the last couple of years as we've been navigating the pandemic, it's really just been about softness. It's been about, this is a place where you can land, where
Mm.
you can share your
Mhm.
thoughts, or we don't really need to focus on what am I doing wrong? Like, what could I be doing better? Like, let's
Mhm.
just come to this space, know that you're accepted, and know that you can be yourself here. But also, back to my point about accountability. Like I have one friend I know who has been wanting to become a teacher and like have her own
Mm,
classroom, and she is going back to school for this, and she has been going
yeah.
back for a while. And every time we talk, she's like, "Girl, like I'm starting over again, or like I'm doing my classes again." I'm like, "Go, girl, go, girl, girl, girl."
Mhm.
She's like, "Kaylin, but like you have to hold me accountable to like continuing. Like I've been doing this for a while. This is my goal, whatever." And I'm like, "I hear that, and thank you, one, for sharing that with me. Like I will
Mhm.
continue to support you and try to validate you in this way." But I
Yeah.
also know that we are incredibly hard on ourselves, and if
Yeah.
you have someone who each time you tell them you're restarting a goal, they're like, "Why didn't you do that sooner?
Mm,
You could have done that,"
mhm.
like, whatever. So, there's definitely a balance. I'm working on that. I'm trying to find
Yeah.
that. But yeah, good relationships see you, they make you feel comfortable, and the next component is they challenge you to be the best version of yourselves.
Yeah. I love that, and I think that I mean, based on my own experience, I guess, in our friendship, at least, I feel like you have a good balance, at least in what works for me, I guess. Again, everybody might be different, but
Yeah.
I think that it is really important because sometimes it's really easy to enable each other's self-sabotaging habits because
Yeah.
it feels safe. And I do think you're right. It does need to be a balance between know that you're always safe to come as you are, even if you are, struggling with whatever goal you're trying to achieve, but knowing when you collectively are like, we can do better than this. Like, I know we can do better
Yeah.
than this. And how do we do better basically without it feeling like
100%.
an attack. And I really like that too because I think that the friendships at least that feel the most kind of transformative and also like like lifelong are the ones where I feel like we will hold each other accountable and kind of help each other to do what we know we want to do, what we know we are capable of doing. And so I really like that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think what you said about, like, knowing the other person's style, because in our
Mhm.
relationship, like, we're very similar, so I know how
Yes.
to, like, we know how to communicate, we know how to
Yeah.
encourage each other, hold each other accountable, but I think in other relationships where people need that more, like, direct, like, "Get yourself together," like, that's just
Right.
not me, but I know that they need that, and
Yeah.
so I'm working on that.
Yes, yes.
Meeting people where they are.
Yes, 100%. And I don't know, can you tell me a little bit more, like, this idea of feeling accountable to each other, responsible to each other, this idea of kind of a community and cultivating a community? Because I think friendships are obviously a big part of that, but I also know that they might not be the entire picture of the relationships in our lives. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you have really cultivated a community around you that allows you to feel safe, that allows you to, continue pushing yourself and being accountable to what you want to do. How did you do that? How are you doing that?
Yeah, I think to your point, for me personally, a lot of my relationships, I think the most important ones happen to be my friendships. I've been a person who hasn't really been very interested in romantic relationships, or maybe I say haven't prioritized, not that I'm not interested, I just haven't
Yeah.
prioritized.
Mhm.
So a lot of my relationships are friendships, and I think first of all, in any relationship, honestly, it takes time, patience, and
Mhm.
intentionality, especially as we've gone through the pandemic. It's just highlighted to me the importance of having relationships where you can come and know there's a shared history there. And a lot of my friendships that
Mhm.
I'm thinking about honestly came out during either college or
Mm.
post college years in Boston.
Okay.
Yeah, I think almost everyone I consider like a close friend I've met. I met while in Boston. I obviously have friends like outside of that, but I think college was definitely a
Mm.
transformative time, and I think part of cultivating a community is also knowing yourself and knowing what you
Yeah.
need, and having folks around you who complement your strengths, who encourage you to grow outside of those strengths. And I think the authentic relationships are the ones that allow people to evolve and allow
Mm.
your friends, your partners to evolve in that, and realize that the person that you're starting this relationship with is not necessarily going to be the same one 5 years down the line.
Mm. Mhm.
Even thinking of our friendship, we met about 5 years ago.
That is so wild to me. Okay,
It's
sorry.
ve
I
no,
know
no,
we
no,
say that I
no.
say that every time, but anyway, sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, it's really wild, and if you were to compare our, like if you were to compare March 2018 Emily and Kalen to March 2023 Emily and Kalen, like,
Mm,
those are very different people,
yeah.
but we've been able to grow, our values have remained the same, and I think that is a consistent piece, is that you have to have similar values in order
Mhm.
to make the relationship work.
Yeah,
What
yeah.
has been your experience of, like, cultivating community?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think when I think about community, it is similar maybe to how I think about friendships, how I have different communities for different things sometimes, and all
That's a
of it
good point.
does collectively make up my community, however, that kind of broad label. But I think for me, the biggest way that I've been able to do that it's usually started in some form of like shared experience, whether that is at a job or if that's school or a class or a dance team or, you know, something like that. There's usually some sort of shared point. And I think it's just also, where we end up spending a lot of our time. Of course, maybe this looks a little bit different post not not post pandemic, but you know what I mean. So maybe this looks a little bit different now, but for me at least it was really okay in these spaces, the people I'm interacting with, it does start with a little bit of a vibe check. I know it's very cliche to say I believe actions not words, but I think that you can really vibe with somebody, and also sometimes you're not going to necessarily either work the best with them, or
Speak
it's
on
not
it.
always going to flow to other parts of your lives. And so I think as I have thought about my community, it does go back to when I think about relationships of like, if we removed this element, do I still want you in my life? Or like not even from that sounds maybe a little
Yep.
bit harsh, but it's just kind of a like, are we both going to make the effort to stay in each other's lives? And time
Mm,
answers that question, or whenever you leave that space, it answers the question. And it doesn't mean that if we don't, it's bad blood or like anything like that.
yeah.
But for me, when I think about the people who have remained in my life, it definitely there is generally a shared some sort of like shared values. And then also I think the effort on both of our parts to kind of show up for each other and make the effort to say, oh, like I would like to see you outside of work, and like actually follow through on that. Because I've said that too. I've been like, yeah, I'd be down, but then I'm not
Yeah.
initiating. Like, so I think for me, that's very important. And also, it's not to say that people need to be fully formed or like arrived at, you know, their
No.
best selves, but I think
No.
that in certain spaces, like I've gotten a little bit better at gauging what I also have the like capacity to give or to be present for. Because if I'm like I want to be friends with somebody, then it's also about what I can show up for you as, and I wanna be fair
Mm,
in that exchange. So I think that the people who are closest to me, I think
mhm.
generally we do have the same degree of, I don't know how to, I guess I'm struggling to find the
Girl.
right word for this because it's not like maturity, it's not, but it's just like the same mindset, the same way we move through the world. So it's like, how do you treat other people? How do you think
Mm,
about things? How do we respond when we are maybe challenged, or someone is like, "Hey, I actually like disagree with you."
mm,
Because to be in community with people, it really does take a lot of like humility and work, both on
mhm.
your own relationship, but also with yourself, and reflections on that too. So I think for me, that's really important. And so most of my community is people who have like started as maybe coworkers or like teammates or something like that, but then we've collectively like realized that we want to stay in contact, and it's worked, and we've made the effort outside of those spaces too.
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah. I really like what you said about collecting information. I think as your friendships continue, as your relationships continue, it is really about collecting information. I think
mhm.
it's really popular nowadays to be like, "Oh, I need to cut people off. They did me wrong," etcetera, etcetera.
Right.
First of all, we're all humans. We're all
Yes.
gonna make mistakes.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that in your course of, like, collecting information, there might be things that are completely egregious and people need to go. But I
Right.
like what you said about just collect the information, take the time.
Mhm.
I think even in thinking about like romantic dating partnerships, like we are so quick to be like, oh, there's a red flag. Oh, there's a red flag.
Right,
And there are
right.
very real red
There are
flags.
yes.
There's a group on Facebook, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but it's called like Are We Dating the Same
Oh
Guy?
my gosh, I
Um,
can't.
there are lots of red flags
Yeah.
in the group, but I think on the whole, collecting information, allowing people space to be human,
Mhm.
is really what we need more of. And I love what you said about your relationship with yourself too, because even in that, like, collect information about yourself. You are not always in the wrong. You are not always in the right. But
Mhm.
taking the time to think about, I've noticed this, I've noticed that, I think is a
Right.
lot healthier than just making rash decisions based on 1 or 2 incidents.
Yeah, yeah. And something I guess that I'm also curious about for you. So I know you when you were talking about this, you mentioned that most of your community, it feels like like came from your kind of college or Boston era.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering, and you obviously were like, I have friends outside of those spaces too. But I'm thinking about as we're kind of talking about this accountability, this kind of almost emotional maturity, I guess, way to approach it.
Mhm.
But why do you think a lot of that happened when it did and like where it did in comparison to high school or middle school? And that's not to say that you everyone has to be friends with people from high school or middle school.
Mhm.
But I'm just wondering why if if you've noticed any like patterns
Mhm.
or reasons potentially that a lot of that came from like college, post college and not younger.
Yeah. So as we're talking, there is one outlier who's it's very clear to me. My friend Martise and I have been friends
Mhm.
since I've like been like 3 years old.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yes, and our relationship has definitely evolved over the years and had like different iterations of it.
Mhm.
We went to elementary school together. We ended up going to different middle schools, but we ended up back at the same high school, and it
Love
wasn't even in
that.
the same like city. So we like that is definitely an outlier, and that is a special, unique relationship.
Mhm.
But for the most part, I think that in college, even though it was very interesting times, even though it was particularly traumatizing at times, I was really able to develop my sense of self. And I think
Mm,
I went to a small all-girls Catholic high school. There was only 29 of us
mm,
in the graduating class, and everyone really had a role to play. And so
mm,
I was playing the academic, I was playing the person who was involved in extracurriculars, I was in theater, I was doing outside stuff. Like,
mm,
I very much played that role. But when I came to college, I was intentional about, no, that's not necessarily who I want to be.
mm,
I want to
mhm,
develop friendships based on who I am, based on my values, based on the life I wanna create for myself. And it doesn't mean that I, like, completely rejected the friendships that I had in high school. Like, I still am close to some people from that time, but I think, again, with the what I said earlier about allowing yourself to evolve, is also recognizing, like, okay, that I'm not that person anymore,
mm,
and it's okay. Send love to the person I was, send love to the friends that
mhm.
I had at the time, but recognizing, like, "Girl, we on a new journey. We
Yeah.
started something else, and let me find friends that can walk with me on this new
Mm,
journey."
mhm,
And I think that's what came that's why it came when it did. But I also, again, back to Boston, as I will always say, it was a difficult time. The whole
mm,
entire time I was here was difficult, and so I think the reason my relationships, my most authentic, my most genuine relationships came out of that time is because I was raw. I was at my most vulnerable time, and so I
mhm,
had to find people who could support me. I had to find
mm,
people who had similar values, who I knew would give life into me, right, when I
mhm.
most needed it. And I am so appreciative of that. And obviously, it's not like I was just, like, sucking the life out of them, but
She
you
definitely
need
was not.
people. You
Confirm.
need people to see you when you don't see yourself, and I think that's
Mm,
really, like, what came out of that time.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is really important. I feel like I forget sometimes that you also went to a Catholic high school because I did too, but,
Girly.
like, we so I feel like we could do an episode on
We
Catholic high
could.
schools. I guess that's the reason I'm always curious because, like, I definitely have friends who similar to you, we've known each other since, like, we were young,
Mhm.
and I think that it definitely is challenging, and I think if also maybe just size was a factor, like, if you're only around, like, 30 people, like, that's I mean, percentage-wise, like, it's maybe 1%, like, it's not you're not gonna and so, like,
Yeah,
because my high school was bigger, like, I think that also probably plays a factor as well, like, you just have a larger amount of people to, like, get to know and
for
to
sure.
connect with. It's very special to be able to have, like, a friendship that has lasted since you were literal children and to
Really.
go through all of those, like, different, like, life phase I mean, middle school, puberty, high school, college, post-college, now we're in our, like, late 20s, or at least, like, my friends and I are in our late 20s,
Mhm.
and so I really do value those friendships that have stayed, but in a way where we're both also growing and changing, and our relationship is changing as we are doing that too,
Mm.
because I think, like, sometimes you say hey to people or, like, hang out, maybe get brunch one time with someone who you, like, used to go to school with, and you're like, "This is fine," but you can sense that, like, we're not
There's a
meant to be friends
disconnect.
right now. Yeah, like,
Yeah.
it's we were friends for, like, 10 years when we were younger, and that was
Mhm.
great, and now we don't need to force this. Like,
Yeah.
it's I'm glad you're doing well, and you can kinda sense you're like, "This we're not in high school anymore. We're not in middle school anymore."
Mhm.
It's hard, like, as I was reflecting on this just more broadly, like, I feel very blessed, like, for all of the relationships and the friendships that I have because it is very hard. It's actually, like, pretty
Mhm.
hard, I think, to find people that are really, like, there for you and support you and see you, and I don't know, and it only gets harder. Like, I know statistically, they say you lose a lot of friends in this time period, right? Like, your
Mm.
mid-20s, late 20s, because and a large part of that is because people get married, and when you
Ooh,
get
I'm not ready
married
for
and
that.
your attention shifts, and then if you have kids, it becomes even more isolating. So I think, like, part of me is also just trying to challenge this notion that that's what has to happen just because that is what maybe has happened for certain groups of people, that it
Mhm.
doesn't have to be what my life looks like. And so, like, this idea that, oh, it's going to be really hard to make friends, or, like, you're not going to be able to make any friends. And, like, for me at least, it's been very almost refreshing, I guess, that I've continued to still make new friends every year that do feel
Mm.
right. So I think, like, even this year, I was able to make, like, some new friends, and part of that was through my PhD program, so in
Mhm.
this time, at least,
Mhm.
we're friends. We may not be friends after our program ends, but, like, that's okay too.
Talk to me about because actually that was one of my questions is I feel like it has been a lot more first of all, we've been in pandemic, fair. But I feel like after college, it has been really hard to make friends. And part of it is because I'm not going out looking for new friends. But I'm wondering in your experience, like how are you making these friends? How are you sustaining these relationships?
Mm, yeah, and honestly, it's so hard because I feel like most of it has been through work or school,
Okay.
and I think although less so work now, I think what was nice about the organization that we worked for
Mhm.
previously together was that it was other young people generally around our age, also mostly, like, young people of color, and so, like, it was
Yep.
a nice place because we were all just kind of, you know you could argue that was a rough experience, so we were all kinda, like, going through this together,
Mhm.
and those
Trauma
those
bonds.
those bonds were formed, but I think that when I talk to some of my friends who work in, like, maybe not those types of settings,
Mm.
they talk about how hard it is because their coworkers are, like, 50, or, like, they're like, "We have nothing to talk about." But I think that what actually stood out to me was that I feel like I was able to become friends with some of my older coworkers who had one of whom who I was, like, maybe 1 or
Mm.
2 years older than her daughter, but I feel
Mhm.
like we were friends. I don't know, she
Those be
like,
the
referred
best
to me as
friendships.
yeah, she referred to me as, like, her friend, so I was like,
Mm.
"That's nice." Like, I it was nice that I feel like those, like, intergenerational friendships were really cool too, and I think that, yes, it obviously is harder, like, Nancy is not gonna be out partying. I mean,
Imagine.
am I even gonna be out partying, like, this weekend? I like
That
but,
part.
like yeah, like, Nancy's not gonna be doing everything with you, right? But, like,
Mhm.
there it doesn't mean that you can't make these friendships, especially, like, within these spaces. And so for me, most recently, at least, I think my friends have come from my PhD program and then also from Instagram. Um,
Mm.
and that has, obviously some of those friendships just stay online, but I
Mm.
have like some of those friendships have also translated to like offline relationships as well.
Wow.
But I feel like you do have to be very selective about it. And it is very much like a, hey, like let's feel this out for both of us. Like, is this gonna work?
Mhm.
And and that's kind of how I've continued to make friends, I think. So I'm kind of curious when I finish this program,
Mm.
how that's going to change, how that's going to look,
Mhm.
especially if I don't work in a traditional like office setting. I don't know. I might
Mhm.
have to pick up another hobby, do something different, like
I'm
start. I
screaming.
don't know. What about you? Because you mentioned that it had been obviously like harder, but like have you how you
Yeah.
have you like like Bumblebee
I was talking to one of my other friends who lives here in Chicago with me the other day. We were driving back from our nail appointment, and we were both talking, like I was asking her because she had made, like, a couple of friends at church, and I was like, "Oh, how is that going?" And she's like, "Yeah, hasn't really gone anywhere, but, like, that's
Mhm.
okay. I'm not really I haven't really put in the effort either." And I'm like, "You know what? Like, to be honest, I say, like, oh, making friends after college, like, hasn't been easy, but girl, I'm good." I have to be honest, I haven't been looking for friendships
Mm.
after or even in the last couple of years, and it's not to say, right, that I if a friend were to come along that I wouldn't be, like, open to it, but I don't think it's something that I've been actively looking towards, and I think that also has to do with capacity, right? Like,
Mhm.
there is only so much capacity that we each have, and I think for me, there's only so much capacity I have for deep relationships, and a lot of the
Yeah.
friendships I currently have happen to be, like, very deep and happen to take a
Mm.
lot of emotional energy to sustain, and not in a negative way, but it's just like, these are my people for now,
Mhm.
and I don't
Mhm.
have energy at this current moment to give to, like, those beginning friendship stages that
Mm,
require a lot
mhm.
of investment in. I just don't
Yeah.
have that capacity right now, but I'm not saying it won't happen. We'll see, but for now, I'm good. And the coworker friend thing, after we worked at that organization, like, I think that was the end of me being
Try
friends with my coworkers. It's not that like, I actually did make I recently started a new job, and I have made a couple of people that I wouldn't mind seeing outside of work, but for the most part, I'm really there to do the
Yeah.
job and keep it
Mm,
pushing, and
mhm.
not even in a negative way again. Very friendly, willing to whatever, but we're
No,
here
that
to do the work, and I'm going home afterwards, and for me, what is working is just having that separation, but I get that not all relationships are at the same levels, like, you don't need to have deep, intimate friendships with everyone you're in a relationship with.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah.
love that. I'd be curious to know, you talk about kind of capacity with friendships, but also how do you navigate a friendship ending or just like kind of maybe there's not an official end, but just it's like it isn't what it was anymore or something happened. Like how do you kind of navigate that happening? How do you gracefully bow out of
That's a
those?
great question. I was actually the other day going through, like, Facebook Messenger, I was just cleaning that out, and I had come stumbled upon a message I had sent to one of my friends. We were in Girl Scouts together, we had been friends since we were probably, like, in elementary school up until middle school, and as you mentioned, middle school is a tumultuous time, but the message I, like, sent to her ending our friendship was so mean.
Oh no.
It was so mean. It was like, "I don't know who you've become, like, I don't know this version of you, like, I think it would be better if we take some space from one another," and I'm just like, "Who does that?" A mean middle school girl does that, like, Yeah.
Is angst, middle school
Yeah,
angst.
it was on brand for that time, but looking back, I'm like, "Wow," like,
Mm,
I have really grown in that way,
mm,
because, yeah, sometimes I can be a mean person, and I'm willing to admit that,
mm,
but in the exiting of friendships, I would say nowadays, that tends to not happen as often, like, either
mhm.
friendships mutually kinda fizzle out or you just kind of let it become what it
Yeah.
is, and it might not be that deep friendship anymore, but I think intentionally exiting friendships, wow, has come up a couple of times in the last year, and I hadn't thought about this before, like, before we came to this episode, but there was one friend in particular who we met at the organization we were working at, and we were really good friends. I always said, like, if I ever ran for office, I would want her to be my, like, chief of staff, like, I would want her to be my right hand
Mm,
person because she just, like, carried herself in such a way that was no BS, like, she was not
mm.
here for any of that. But during the pandemic, we just kinda she kinda just stopped replying to my messages. Which now I can laugh about, but at the time hurt, like, that hurt, and I would reach out and she wouldn't respond, and again, like, friendships don't always mutually end, so that was that, and then most recently, I had a friendship where out of the blue, she texts me and was just going in, and I'm like, "W 1, where did this come from?" 2, I was like, "It sounds like I have hurt you, so I apologize for hurting you, but, like, let me know what you need for me to move forward." And I think it's great, right, to see the other person's needs, to understand what they're looking for and to give them space. But I also think sometimes you have to ask yourself what you're also looking for in that relationship.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
after that, I was like, you know what would benefit me in this relationship? And I think what would be mutually beneficial is actually for this relationship to end. This will be the last message you receive from me,
Ooh,
but wishing you
yeah.
all of the best.
Mhm.
And when I was sending that, I'm like, that seems a little mean. I don't wanna hurt her feelings, whatever." But I'm like, if and that was not the only, like, issue we had, but if we keep coming back to the same things, the same issues, not giving each other space to move through them or just recognizing, like, our values are just not the same. That's why we keep
Mm,
coming to this
mhm.
space, knowing that it's okay to be like, "I'm sending you so much love on your journey, but I'm recognizing this is where our friendship ends, and that's okay."
Mhm.
That's okay.
Yeah.
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 How are you navigating those weird moments?
Yeah. So, I haven't really had too many, like, intentional conversations saying, that this needs to end. Because I think, like,
I'm
I
dramatic
tend to
sometimes.
take no, 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 I think it's I mean, I'm very historically, at least, have also been very, like, conflict averse, like, I don't like having those types of conversations, I'd rather just kind of pull back from that, and I think so for me, at least, the way that sometimes I do boundary set is that, like, I have learned that sometimes trying to have an intentional conversation with somebody can lead to
Oh,
either more
100%.
problems or just, like, more awkwardness instead of just kind of maybe instead of, "Okay, I used to always pick up your calls. Now it's, like, kind of a little too much. So I'm maybe not gonna pick up your call every time you call me, but I will text you saying, 'Hey, I can't talk right now. Like, what's going on?
Mm,
Is everything okay?'" And then just, checking. I mean, like, most of the time, I,
yeah.
like, actually can't talk because 'cause it'll be, like, I'm in the middle of doing something, but I think that even just having like, most of my close friends are similar in that if we usually don't call. I feel like I don't know if this is a millennial thing, but, like, we don't call each other,
Mhm.
and I have, like, told a lot of people recently, like, the only people that I will, like, pick up there's a group of
Screaming.
people who I will, like, pick up the phone if I see them calling me because I know that it's probably for a reason.
Mhm.
Otherwise, they would text me first and say, "Hey, can I talk to you about this? Do you have time today to talk about X?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "I need to know why you're calling me because, like, what is about to transpire here?"
Mm.
And so I think, like, for me, it's been how can I set my boundaries? Maybe not always by, like, directly saying, "Hey, I'm setting a boundary here," but in some of those decision makings and those
Mhm.
actions. So I think that for me at least, though, it's important to recognize that like friendships, also romantic relationships, but I think so often they're seen. I saw this like TikTok recently of, or it was like Instagram Reels, whatever, but it was of this like
Mhm.
person saying that it's really unfortunate that we've been conditioned to view relationships ending as like a failed relationship. And I think that
Mm.
sure you could make that argument, but I also think that that is like a really negative way of looking at how we spend our time and who we spend our time with. And I think that just because you're not dying, you're on your deathbed with somebody doesn't mean that that was a waste of time. It doesn't mean that
Mm.
it wasn't an important friendship or it didn't like serve its purpose in that moment. So I think that that's also something that should be thought about as well, or like reframed a little bit, because not feeling like you have to hold on to everything because you're worried about failure or worried that it's going to be a failure. I think that's also really important to recognize.
Mm.
Like we had our good times. We had fun at brunch. We had fun at the club. We
We
had
had fun at
fun.
brunch, we did.
That's great. I'm cool with that. Maybe we had
Mhm.
one really deep conversation and then both of us were like, that was a
Why'd we
weird
do that?
why we do that? Yeah, and we both are like, "You know what? It doesn't need to go any farther." But that's
Mhm.
fine. We had still had a really good conversation. So, like, I think that recognizing that it's not a failure, like, it's not always a failure, right? Like, so because I recognize some people are gonna be like, marriage to death do us part is the goal," and I'm like, "Okay."
I definitely agree there. I definitely agree there. And I think a lot of our conversation has been focused on friendships, on this type
Mm,
of relationship, and I'm wondering, like, in knowing that honestly a majority of our relationships are platonic
mhm.
based. I know that in some people's cases that's not the case, but for us a lot of our relationships are built
Plus
in
yeah, mhm.
friendships, and I'm wondering what does intimacy look like in those platonic settings for you?
Yeah. I feel like this is so important and so underrated
Mm,
because especially, and again, this is a generalization, but especially with like men, and I think it's not always their fault, but like
I'm
intimacy is
screaming.
so often connected to our romantic partners. It's like you can only have intimacy with someone who you are also like romantically attached or interested in, which I think is a
Mm,
very narrow way of looking at it, because also like if you're asexual or like
come
if
on,
you
girl.
are not like it's like that I don't always like want to, so I think to place intimacy on romantic relationships only is just so bad for everybody. And so I think that
Mm,
platonic intimacy, it does go for me. What makes, my friendships just feel my dream friendships is just where I
mm,
feel like we can be very open and honest with each other about what we're thinking or what we're feeling or what we want, and be able to really talk, like show ourselves and talk about those pieces of ourselves on a very deep level. It's the being vulnerable part too. That is a big,
mm,
for me, big part of it, especially as someone who in most cases the image I will project is one of being more put together. But then with my friends who I feel like I can be more open with, I'm not always that person. And it's okay that I'm not always that person, and being able to say that and say, I sometimes I sent you that thing where I was like, I feel like this is maybe a bad sense of humor, but I'm gonna send this to you. Why do I find this so funny? So just being able to have that intimacy with your friends, I just
mm.
feel like is so nice. Like it's just,
Mm,
and I mean, my partner always jokes like that I'm cheating on him with my friends. It's
that's
obviously a joke.
hilarious.
And I'm like, I'm like, yeah, I'm like, you're the side chick. And he's like, I know. But
Oh
no,
my god.
I feel like it's so underrated. And it also I
Mm,
think probably will help if you're interested in romantic relationships. It honestly might help with that relationship too, because then again, back to our point about like, not everyone is going to be everything. And so now
mhm.
I have other people that I feel safe talking about stuff with, and it doesn't all have to fall on you. And if you're not meeting those needs, obviously that's a conversation, but I don't need you to meet that need because I
Yeah.
have my friends. But what does it look like for you? How do you think about platonic intimacy?
Yeah, I love the piece about vulnerability. I love the pieces about not a singular person can carry everything you need.
Mm,
I think that sometimes it can be hard, as a single woman to figure out like where the romantic piece comes in. It's
Mm.
because I think because I have such high expectations or based on my platonic, like intimate
Mm.
relationships with
Mhm.
my friends, that I'm like, what are y'all bringing to the table? What are
Mm.
y'all bringing to the table? Like these people are such high quality. Let me not get on that tangent, but I will ground this conversation at least. One of my friends the other day text our group and was like, she sent us a screenshot of basically a conversation that people on the internet were having about friendships and romantic partnerships.
Mhm.
And she was like, "Yeah, I don't think friendships nor romantic partnerships provide you with a complete like package of all you need." But she said, "I do think there are different expectations about showing up for people depending on the type of relationship. I think there's an expectation to drop everything for a romantic partner. This isn't carried
Mm.
over in the same way for friends. Sometimes family has limitations too." And I immediately responded. I was like, "Thank you. Thank you for sharing this. Love that we're getting this conversation started." And I was like, "I wonder if my perspective will change. As to your point, friends get married, friends have babies." But I said, as of this moment, I feel pretty complete fulfilled in my non-romantic relationships, so much so that I think it affects my mentality when
Mm.
looking for a romantic partner. Besides physical intimacy, I don't feel like I'm missing out on much as a single person. I've found my person who I would drop anything for, buy a home together, start a business with, raise kids, etc., but we're friends and have no romantic connection.
I think this leads into kind of our last point about the kind of glorification or obsession with kind of romantic love as the kind of the ultimate form of love. Because it's so interesting to me that when you are not focused on finding a romantic, the question then becomes, well, is something quote unquote off? Because I
Literally.
remember I really relate to it's just not a priority. Of course, I thought about it. And I'm sure there were moments where I was like, oh, it'd be cool to have a guy ask me out or be taken on a date. But
Mhm,
I really like, I did not date that much. The relationship that I'm in right now is my first serious relationship. Prior to that, I had one boyfriend freshman year of high school.
mhm.
And I feel like when I would explain to people that I just didn't really care, I think they kind of thought I was trying to be a pick me and being like, look at me, I don't
Literally.
need men, I don't really care. And I'm like, no, it's not really that I'm like, F this, I'm fine on my own. But I really was just like,
Don't
I found for a while men just to be so energy draining and like y'all not bringing anything to the table,
but
like
got a lot of questions about
anything.
what we bring in. Mhm.
Yes. And I'm like, why am I going to sit here? I don't even care about getting a free meal if I have to listen to you. I'm not doing that. I'm going out to eat by myself. I really don't care. And I know that maybe some people do that as a mechanism for survival, so I'm not talking about that, but I'm just like, I don't need a man. I'm so sorry. And especially someone who's like questionable about whether or not I want kids, like I
Mm,
really don't need a man. But for a while, I mean, my mom, did I tell you this already? There's a
mm-mm.
point where she asked me if I liked girls. Why is the assumption that if I'm not out here like actively dating or actively like pursuing a romantic relationship that you think it's because something is quote unquote wrong or like
Mhm,
off or like you're different? And so I just I don't know. I of course I'm very grateful to my partner. I love my partner, but he is not the end all be all, I guess. And I've told him this before. I'm like, I also want that for him. I want you to have meaningful, deep relationships with your friends. And of course,
mm,
I'll be here for you. And it's not like I'm planning on us breaking up or anything, but
mhm.
no, my friendships are always going to be very important to me. And I have a select group of friends who I will drop anything for. If they need me, I will be there.
Literally,
It's not a question. Like, it's
not
not
a
a question at
question.
all. So I just think that's also one of my biggest pet peeves when people get into romantic relationships and drop their friends. I get it. There's always going to be a transition time. So
Mm,
it's not that I can't be patient or flexible or understanding that our relationship might shift a little bit because I get it. But
mhm.
it is the effort. It's like you're not even like texting me anymore. You're not even saying like how are you doing or all your texts are about your
Ooh,
partner.
ooh,
That is so
ooh.
aggravating. And thankfully that hasn't really happened with most of my friendships and I really
Not
tried
at this
actively
point,
for that
no.
to not be the way that I behave either because my friends were here before you. And if anything happens, I'll be here after you. So I'm going to continue nurturing those friendships.
Mhm.
And I guess the final piece for me at least is that we've been talking a lot about our friendships, our relationships. And I think that one of the biggest pieces that I always try to keep in mind is also the relationship I have with myself. And I also
Mhm.
think that that takes, I don't know if a priority is the right word, but that's something that I hold in very high regard too, because I need to, at the end of the day, I'm spending the most amount of time with myself. And I'm like, do I like myself? Do I like hanging out with myself? Maybe this comes from trauma or my hyper independence, whatever you want to call it. But the reality is, the only person whose actions you can actually control
Speak
is
on it.
you. As much as people say they love you, they could decide one day to leave. And I'm not saying I don't move through my friendships or relationship in a fear-based mindset with that, but you cannot control other people. And so they can talk all they want. They can say these things. Crazier things have happened than people leaving their spouses. Crazier things have happened than parents giving up their children. As an adoptee, this is something that perhaps has shaped my view on this. So I just think that I need to know that I'm okay with me and that I can take care of me too. And again, it's nuanced. I want to recognize it's nuanced. It's not to say that I ignore people or community or friendships, but I need to feel okay with myself. I need to be okay with myself. So that's the other that's kind of the other piece that people sometimes forget too. So you mentioned a little bit about how you're not necessarily uninterested either. So
Mhm.
I would love to know a little bit more about how you are feeling now, especially now that you've moved, you're in a new city, you've
Yes.
been, like, on a few dates, so I'm curious, like, how you see romantic relationships having a role in this next phase of your life or just in the future. Because like, I think it's okay to also admit that we want that. Like, that's also fine to admit
Yeah, yeah,
too.
yeah,
We don't have to
yeah.
be like, "I don't want that, I
I'm
don't need
above
that."
that.
Exactly. Like, so I'm curious, like, how is your
Mhm.
understanding around this? Like, how has it shifted? What are you hoping to see? I'm, like, personally very excited for your romantic dating
Yeah.
era,
Mhm.
'cause if that's something you want, then I want that for you, so please tell
That's
me
so
more.
nice. Yes. Well, one, I will say I actually have a date later this afternoon, so
Ooh,
very
okay.
excited. But yeah, more recently I've definitely been coming around to like making time to
Mm,
have a partner. And
mhm,
I think that's honestly a big part of it is like consciously being like, okay, if we're going to do this, like let's actually
mm,
devote our energy to this instead of like doing it half-heartedly. And so first of all, these apps, again, I will mention what's happening there. I don't know. Don't know what's happening on the apps. There was actually an in-person singles mixer that I was supposed to go to on Thursday, but I had a this week has been very long, so I
mhm.
didn't go.
Okay.
But long story short, about a week ago, actually, I had the most achingly beautiful dream about my wedding. Like the
Mm.
venue, the decor, the dress, and the
Ooh,
emotions are still so vivid to me. And I've
yeah.
very much been a person like, oh, I don't want to get married, or oh, I'm not really sure about that. Same thing with the kids, but I think more recently, like, have definitely been
Mm,
coming like around to it.
mm,
So I'm trying to be more open to it, trying to realize to your point, it also takes a level of vulnerability. It takes a level of admitting to yourself, like, you might actually want this. And I think there's some grief that comes around when thinking that, right? Like, oh, this is
mm,
something that you actually like want. It's not here yet. It hasn't been here
mm.
for a minute.
Yeah,
That's okay. Like, it's okay to be sad that you don't have a
yeah,
partner, it's okay to, like, feel the feels, and I think that is part of the reason probably, honestly, that I've been avoiding this is because you have to acknowledge the grief that also exists
yeah,
in that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And I mean, as much as I give men a lot of flack, and also your partner does not have to be a man either, but I do think that at the end of the day, like, I have seen examples of, like, my friends who are in very healthy lifelong partnerships with men,
Mhm.
and so I think that it is possible, like, it sometimes feels I think sometimes it definitely feels impossible,
Mhm.
but I don't know, I guess I choose to be slightly optimistic about this because I do think that there's still people out there. There's still people out there, and I think,
Yeah.
like, it will take work, and, like, sometimes you do just get, like I feel like I got randomly lucky because I mean,
Mm.
my romantic relationship did not start as, like, an intent to date, so, like,
Mhm.
that also made me feel, I think, further down the line, like, I questioned it a little bit because I was like, I mean, I didn't even, like,
Mm.
go into this, like, viewing him as, like, a longtime partner, like, what does that mean? But the reality is our relationship evolved, and, like, he is an amazing partner. I'm really
I know what you're
excited for
saying,
you
yeah.
because, I want that for you. So, through the whatever transpires, hopefully there's more ups than downs in
Mhm.
as you embark on it, but I'm excited for you, and I'm celebrating that you are, like, saying, "Oh, I'm, like, coming around to this. I want this." And I think those realizations take a lot of courage, so I'm excited.
I love that. No, I definitely love that and appreciate that. And I mean, I'm overall, like, excited, like, obviously, to your point there'll be ups, there'll be downs, there'll be in betweens, like,
Mhm.
it is what it is, but definitely excited to see kind of what
What it
transpires.
brings, yeah.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I am a hopeless romantic, I think. I love love. I
Ooh.
do love love. It is I can be critical, I know, but I ultimately
I
want people
love
to
that.
feel so yeah,
I feel
but
like we're both, like, softies, and we often can portray as, like, very serious or very, like, down to business or very, like, "I'm just focusing on my life right now," but I agree. At the core, like, I do love and all of its versions. But as we always end, it is that time. Emily, what do you need clarity on this week?
yeah, so I this is maybe a bit trivial.
Mm.
I need to know the people who stand up immediately when the plane lands. I want to know why. I wanna know where you think you're going when the plane lands
Mhm,
and what
mhm.
you think you're doing. So, most recently, I flew to Baltimore for a conference and I flew back.
Ah, yeah.
I it's interesting because when I was studying abroad in London, I noticed that the Europeans in general are more aggressive. You have to, like, fight your way. They will stand up, they will go past you, like, you need to hold your own, and I remember hating that because I was like, "Can we just all exit in, like, an orderly."
Literally.
And maybe I'm generalizing too, so, like, I'm sure there's Europeans who don't do this, right? But I just noticed that in the US, I think, like, the plane etiquette does tend to be a little bit more like, "I'll let you go if you're in front of me."
Mhm, mhm.
But yeah, so this flight from to Baltimore and then back from Baltimore, and I think, like, I had a layover in JFK, so, like, those 2 flights, people were, like, standing up immediately and rushing out, and so I just, like, I wanna know, am I missing something here? Because, like, I get
Mm.
it. There's a few scenarios where maybe it makes sense. Like, you really have to go to the bathroom, maybe you, like, don't feel good. I'm like, in that case, go for it. Get off the
Mhm,
plane or you have a connection, whatever.
mhm.
But I'm like, you are saving such a minimal amount of time usually, especially if we're in the back of the plane. I'm like, we're not going anywhere. Like,
Baby, you got 15 minutes before you can even stand up.
I'm just like, "What are you doing?" Like, I don't I'm just I maybe I'm missing something. So I don't know because
Mm.
funnily enough, and maybe this means I'm petty, but so
I'm
in
screaming.
when I was studying abroad, on those planes, sometimes you would deplane from the back, and so when people would stand up,
Ooh.
but then surprise, surprise, we're deplaning from the back, I
I
always had such satisfaction
love that.
because I
I
was like,
love
"This is
that.
what you get for trying to, like, shove your way to the
I
front,
love
and now
that.
you're in the back." So, anyway, again, maybe it makes me petty, but, like,
Love
I
it.
would like to know. I have a flight coming up, and I'm very curious to see how people behave on
Mm.
the flight 'cause I try to be nice. I try to be nice. I'll be like,
Mhm.
"You go. Take your time. Get your bag. You're in front of me. Go." So, that is what I need clarity on. So, if anyone either does this or knows why people do this, feel free to let me know.
I love that.
What do you
I
need
love that.
clarity on this week?
Yes, similarly, not something, like, large, but I'm very particular about my food, and I'm very
Mm.
particular about, like, utensils that I might use or appliances that
Oh,
I might
okay.
use with my food, and
Yeah.
so I have really been into smoothies lately, but I cannot clean my bullet blender properly, and it's annoying
Oh.
me, so I need clarity on how are y'all cleaning your blenders? Is all I'm
Mm.
seeing is, like, the trap seeds, milk, etcetera, under that, like, plastic tubing,
Oh, okay.
and it's very annoying to me. And I
$100.
actually
Okay.
specifically have a water bottle. I love using the Tequila water bottle brands because you can remove they build it so you can remove the plastic
Plastic.
and, like, clean under it, but these blenders are not doing that.
You
So
can't remove yeah.
please, you can no, it's so hard, like, I've been trying, I've used paper clips, I've, like, looked online, I'm watching YouTube videos, I'm using knives, and it won't come up, and I'm really missing
Mm.
my chocolate chip and banana late night smoothies. So please get
Okay.
back to me as soon as possible, or recommend a new
A
blender because
blender.
I
Wait, yeah, which one is it that you have?
it's the Ninja Bullet blender.
Okay, okay.
I think I might just need to get an
To get a
actual
different
blender
oh,
and not, like, the little, like, bullet pod things, but
yeah. That can be an
it's
upgrade
stressing
we
me
both
out.
make. Yeah, 'cause I have the Magic Bullet ones,
Y
but I know what you mean, and seeing those, you're just like
it's gross, like, it's gross.
you're
It's
like, "That
gross.
has been there for 3 smoothies now."
Literally. And they're like, "Oh, just put water and soap and, like, turn
And
it
turn
on."
it
I'm like,
on.
"I'm
Yep,
doing that, but it still traps
it's
under
not
the
there.
ceiling." Oh
Let
my
us know.
gosh.
Blender recommendations?
Blender
Blender guys.
recommendations,
Yeah.
why people are getting up on planes.
Yes.
Please, if you have any
Questions that
commentary
need
at all.
answers.
Questions that need answers. Yes, yes, yes. But
Well,
with that, we're at the end of our episode, and like we always say,
we'll see you when we see you.
we'll see you when we see you.
Bye.
Bye.